My name is Anton de Weger. I work for the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health, and I work specifically on the Australian Epilepsy Project.
Excellent. Thank you, Anton. Tell us a little bit more about the Australian Epilepsy Project, firstly.
Well, I'm really lucky. I'm a technologist, and I sit in the room with a whole bunch of really smart researchers and clinicians. And what we're trying to do is build a new data set using all the latest technology that is linked between all the different modalities, and that allows us to then understand the brain and how epilepsy affects it much better.
Interesting. And so what brings you to Digital Health Week?
I'm here to talk about what we've discovered so far. I'm working with AWS here. We do our hosting on AWS, and so representing what their customers are doing in that space.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned, wanting to share about what you've uncovered in relation to epilepsy, how it affects the brain. Tell me a bit more about that.
Okay. So epilepsy is a really interesting condition because it's a normally functioning brain that then stops functioning normally. And so you get both sides of the view. You can see it normally functioning, and then when it stops functioning, you can see the growth of that epilepsy seizure through the brain using the latest technologies. So what we're using is a combination of MRIs, which shows you the structure of the brain, functional MRIs, which shows how it is processing when you're thinking about certain things. We then link that with genetics, cognitive testing, medical history, and surveys from the participant to be able to create a really good data set and really understand what's going on there. Epilepsy is a really difficult condition because there's a lot of uncertainty. When you turn up to see a professional, they're unlikely to be able to tell you, are you going to have another seizure? Are you going to get your driver's license back? And what medications will work? And we want to answer all of those questions. And we're using a combination of image processing, straight data science, but also a lot of machine learning and AI in that space as well, to try to better understand what the connections are between all of these different data sets and merge that information together to give us predictive outcomes.
Yeah, interesting, because that'd be one thing to get all of that retrospective research data to say, oh, that's interesting, that's how that happened. But I guess for the patient, for someone with epilepsy, how do you take those insights into something that is actionable, that if it is preventative or at least predictive, that it could be useful to them?
That's a very good question. So the first thing that we do is we try to work out what's the minimum amount of information that we can give back to the clinician that allows them to make the best possible diagnosis and treatment decisions. So we don't want to flood them with all the information. We want to create that really consistent view, and that includes a couple of different things. It includes things like a radiologist report, the genetics report, and then a bunch of calculations that we do that are related to how epilepsy works. Things like calculating the hippocampal volume of the brain, so the distance between the white matter and the grey matter in a certain structure in the brain, all of which which is now automated using AI, and we feed that back to the clinician in a baseline report. So while the number one aim of the project is to collect a really large world-leading data set, we're looking to build it at about 3,000 participants and about 1,000 control participants or volunteers. The second part of the project is actually delivering those results back to the clinician for patient benefit in the same time. So we are already seeing a lot of really good patient outcomes coming out of this. We're seeing people fast-track through to surgery. Surgery is a potential outcome for people with epilepsy. Only about 70% of people with epilepsy find seizure control through drugs, so 30% don't. The average wait time to go for surgery in the hospital that we're linked with is about 20 years. It's so from your seizure to when you get surgery and seizure control is about 20 years. That time frame hasn't changed since the 80s, and we're able to shorten that time frame down to about 2 years. And so that's a huge benefit for the participant. We're also able to find new genetic biomarkers that can help to determine the cause of the epilepsy. Our imaging at a really high resolution and with a very trained radiologist workforce is allowing us to see issues with images at about 10% more. So epilepsy is about a $12.5 billion per year cost to the Australian government in healthcare costs. If we can just make a really small change and improvement in even just identification and reduction of seizures, then that's really good.
And so then with attendees here at Digital Health Week, what would you hope that people take away from, I guess, you've done a keynote, I think you mentioned, and sharing some of these insights and working with AWS to get the word out there. What are you hoping that people walk away with? Is it just knowing that the thing exists, getting involved? Tell me more.
Okay, well, first of all, I think there's two real good answers to that. The first part of it is, understanding how we can build healthcare that's outside of the hospital. So how we can build a technology process that takes all the data from wherever it comes from and then has a automated system that applies machine learning to it and gets you to an end result. So that is possible, and I think that's going to be what the future is going to look like for lots of condition-specific healthcare. So we have specialised systems that can really understand a condition and give you a really good idea on what the best next steps are going to be. The other side of this is we've built all of this in about 18 months, embedded within a research group and with clinicians as well, and it is possible. So we have a very small group. We have 4 people in the office in Melbourne. We do the design of the software, we do the data science, and then we've been using an offshore development team to be able to build all of those components. So we've built an automated knowledge processing pipeline, an image processing pipeline, and a clinician portal that they can access all of that data and then put new referrals in through. And that has worked out to be quite an efficient way to do it. We did an agile process for development, so lots of small incremental changes, trying to do our minimum viable product first and then iterating forward from that. And that worked really well. And I've seen a couple of other companies and groups doing that and working really well with that, but I also see a lot of technology costing a lot more than it should and not really achieving those goals in the healthcare space. It is difficult, but it is possible to innovate in here. Working out a way to turn it into a commercial product is a little bit more complex in this space, but everybody is having that problem.